And welcome to another session of Write Club, where we write and we share and the rules don't matter. And there are no rules, just like writing. There are no rules in Write Club, except that there are no rules, but there are some rules, Write Club rules with a W. And those are that we are here to write. One of the best things in my early career as a writer, and as we were just sharing in some of the famous authors that we have known over time, some of the best things are that we only see once the writer has come out with their brilliant book and their successful TV show and their successful movie and everything that comes along with that. We only see them after the fact. What we don't see is all of the hours that they spent in an environment just like this one, a round table with a creative crew, with a Write Club, where they were able to write and share their feedback and see the reactions or hear the reactions of their audience or of their listeners, their early listeners, and then be able to sharpen that tool, that saw, that mind, the voice, into what really works for you and what maybe you're trying to have work for you because you admire other authors who sound like that. But here we're really getting into what works for you. And one of the best indicators of what works for you is what other people remember about what you've said, or about what you've given, what you've presented, what you've shared. That's the biggest link into what we think works in our head and what is actually working out in the world is what people will remember and what they resonate with. Because you're speaking from your soul. More important, you're writing from your soul when it resonates with other people. And here's a big distinction. You're not writing for other people. A lot of people say that, who's your book for? Oh, it's for everybody. Well, if you're writing for everybody, you're actually writing for nobody, because you're trying to please everyone and you can't please everyone. It's like that joke, you can't please everyone. You're not chocolate. You're not pizza, however you want to end that sentence. You're not here to please everyone. You're here to please that one person who needs to hear what you have to say. And they won't hear it unless you're speaking from your soul. So before we get into the exercise today, and today we're looking at a teaching memoir. Last week we looked at prescriptive nonfiction, which is has a little bit more of a framework to it. It has what's called the SWIFT model: story, wisdom, information, formula, or facts, and then tools or techniques, that last one. Here we're looking at a teaching memoir, which is sort of halfway between a prescriptive nonfiction and a narrative memoir. Next session, we're going to get into the narrative memoir. Narrative memoir looks more like fiction. Basically, the two rules of thumb are: nonfiction is educational, fiction is entertainment. Today, we're staying firmly in the educational model. It's a teaching memoir. So we're not looking to make it an arc of a story like a fiction would be, or a narrative memoir follows the same arc of a fiction. It has to take you on a journey that entertains you, that has the highs and the lows and the dips. And that's great storytelling. Today, we're actually looking at a teaching memoir, which still has to have some of that narrative memoir, but still touches on a little bit of that educational. So it's really that halfway point between prescriptive nonfiction and narrative memoir, or any kind of narrative. We're here in the middle. Most self-help, how-to, spiritual work that is written is, in fact, a teaching memoir. And if you think of it, any book that is nonfiction, that has really touched you, that you've really resonated, that you've changed your life for, it's usually a teaching memoir. And if you just think of that, I can't speak for any individual one, But even if you wanted to know an author, how they got to be an author, if you wanted to know anything's, great example, The Alchemist, exactly. Now, The Alchemist is, in fact, a fiction, but exactly, you're right on. It's written in the style of a teaching memoir. There are lessons conveyed throughout it. So I love that you just brought The Alchemist up as an example, because it really does show how fiction and your narrative fiction and teaching memoir really has a big crossover. And Alchemist is a perfect example. Eat, Pray, Love is a narrative memoir that has teachings woven into it, specifically the teachings that she learned while traveling and from these elders, wise, the shamans and in the ashram. So these are the books that really have an ability to have a huge impact on the world. But you're not writing it for the world. You're writing it for one person who needs to hear this. So it's a big distinction. One of the things I have my authors do as we set up building the framework, to make sure that you're not just motivated, because motivation doesn't last, but inspired. Motivation is a push, inspiration is a pull, is begin writing every time you sit down from now on for the rest of this challenge. Write to someone. Create a character, whether it be someone that you know, whether it be a composite of people that you know, whether it be to your imaginary best friend. But you start every writing session with "Dear" and the name. And just to give you some framework around this, perspective, one of my personal favorite books is The Diary of Anne Frank. As some of you may know, if you've heard me say it before in video or on speeches, my grandmother was cousins with Anne Frank. And it helped, when I was a little girl, I had this like poofy hair and I looked a lot like the picture that we are familiar with Anne Frank. There aren't many pictures of her. And I really felt this resonance with her, mostly because she had the power to change the world with a book, like a notebook and a pen. And I thought that was the biggest superpower that anybody could have. Anne Frank was my superhero. And if you remember, in the Diary of Anne Frank, she started every one of her journal entries to her friend, to a name. This is what carried Anne Frank through all that dark time. It was a composite name. It changed here and there. It was an imaginary friend. Nobody knew who this person was, but she started her writing every time to this person. And that's what allowed her to continue writing day in and day out, even when she had nothing to write about, no inspiration, no writing prompts, no, turn on the meditation on YouTube to get in the zone. She wrote to a friend. And when you put that kind of heart and soul into it, then your writing sounds less robotic, more heart-filled, heartful, because you're actually writing it to somebody who you want to convey a message to. And so now we look at this teaching memoir, and I'll give you the framework or the template for the teaching memoir, and then we'll go into a little bit of free writing. You begin a teaching memoir. A teaching memoir is there to give a reader specific wisdom, or a teaching of some slant or some different way of seeing things, a different perspective, but that comes from your life experience in that matter. So this is the memoir aspect of it. It's not from an academic perspective. It's not the latest research on this topic. It's not the 3,000-year history into this tradition. It's your perspective. It's a snapshot in time of this specific thing. It's like a Polaroid picture. Or let's say a series of Polaroid pictures at one event. Now, a memoir, a fiction or a narrative memoir can be organized in a myriad of different ways, but a teaching memoir really does have some chronology. Because after all, there's a teaching aspect to this memoir. It's conveying a lesson built on another lesson, built on another lesson, built on another lesson. The number of lessons or the number of chapters doesn't matter. This is irregardless. The teaching points that you want to include are entirely up to you. That being said, the human mind, for whatever reason, really gravitates to 3s, 7s, 9s, 11s. Ideally, if you can consider that you had 3 different teachings, or 7, or 9, or 11, and organize your teaching memoir into that number of lessons or teachings, that is the ideal. And each one has to have sort of a greater gravity to them. You couldn't have learned this bigger lesson without having been prepared with this lesson. And then you couldn't have learned the next lesson without having been prepared for the previous lesson. And as mentioned, the Alchemist does just a beautiful job of this. That sometimes the new path opens up only to teach another lesson. This becomes your different subtopics. So every chapter that you open up with becomes that new Polaroid. This is a new pathway. This is the lesson I learned here, or this is the lesson I needed to learn by the end of it. So in this way, you're somewhat taking the same framework as we talked about last time with the narrative, with the teaching manual, the prescriptive book, which has each chapter is its own universe, has its own lesson within it. In a teaching memoir, you very often end your chapters with open loops, because it's as if to say, well, now that I learned this lesson, I was prepared for what was coming ahead of me. Now that I got over this, I was ready for the next step of my evolution. Now, you can include exercises or meditations at the end of a teaching memoir, but they don't have to. You don't have to. There are some books that have great effect with that, but not as much as you don't want to disrupt. This is still a journey that you're taking someone on. It's still entertainment. You can still envision this as being a movie. There's still scenes that happen here. But you don't have to employ as many lyrical devices, as many just great writing devices that we will cover next week in metaphor and anaphora and analogies. Here you're really just telling your story. And you start with who I am and why I have something to say about this subject. That's critical to begin with. Who you are and why you have something to say about this matter. It's opening the story to introduce your reader or your one person to who you are, and inspiring a vision of what became of you, that you lived inside this story and that you learned these lessons along the way, has to be something inspiring for the reader. You can't just leave them with who I am and have them mired in this darkness. You have to tell them, here's who I am, and here's why I have something to say about this topic. That gives them the inspiration, because they're picking up that book in the same pain as who you are before you learned the things that you have to say about this. So now they need to hear, not just they want to hear, they need to hear what it is that you learned, the lessons along the way. And then you start with chapter 1, the first step on my journey, and the lesson I learned. And you open it to chapter 2, the second step on my journey, the lesson I learned. And so on and so on and so on. For your 3, for your 7, your 9, your 11. And then you end with how to take what I've taught, what I've learned, what I've shared in this book, and use it out in the world. That's very critical. A lot of authors, when you're writing for yourself to get it off your chest, for catharsis, to understand yourself better, you can leave that part out. And that's great. But that's journal writing. And it has its space and it has its tool for your own catharsis. In fact, I think it's the best tool for your own catharsis. I think that when you write something down on paper, it takes a new life, more so than the spoken word. When you're sitting on a therapist's couch, and I'm not knocking therapists, there is a place for therapy in this world, but when you've spoken out your journey, the words have evaporated as soon as you've spoken them. So you don't have depth of clarity with the words that you've given to the journey. But if you write it, you have perspective. More than that, if you write it freehand, which is what we're doing here, you have perspective that can't be erased. Whereas if you type it, you'll go back in, we all do, and edit and remove a line and delete a line and delete a block. We all do. It's our inner critic, our inner censor will do that automatically. But if you've handwritten in your journal, then you can come back to it years later and think, I knew then, or I didn't know then, or I was a prophet, or I had no idea what was coming. It's right there, black on white. It's there on paper. I can't tell you how many times I've looked back in one of my journals from years ago, only to find that if I had written that story back then, I'll give you an example. I opened up one of my old journals recently in 2020, and the journal was dated from 2012. And I had this great idea for a novel called After the Cat, where there was this big catastrophe on the world that made everyone stay home. And, the world had to change the way that they communicated, and that in fact, it made people more telepathic. And I wrote out this whole story. And then at the very bottom, I wrote, we start counting at year 2020, that becomes 0. And it was, and I wouldn't have even remembered that story unless I had written it on paper and had it there for me to come back and peruse and happen to see. So I truly believe that we have the greatest gifts of prophecy and insight through the written word. I can geek out on the woo-woo beyond the scope of this course, but I will also say, if you want something to happen, write it down. Write it down. There is magic that happens with the written word. And with that, I will say, let's get into the free writing meditation. If everyone's ready, if you have your pen in hand, your book, I actually would like to read the guidelines for free writing meditation. So, and in case you've heard it before, listen for this. The guidelines, I say there are no rules in Write Club, but there are guidelines. So be prepared, get comfortable, remove all your distractions, have a notebook and extra pens handy, put the date and the topic at the top and the intention on the top of the page. And today I gave you an extra task of writing Dear and a name to make this personal. And every time you start getting in your head, repeat that throughout the page, dear, and the person that you're writing to reconnect you to your heart. The reason for the intention and the date on the top of the page is it will help you reference your writing when you're building your story bank later on. And also, it's just really cool to open up a journal and find something that you wrote in 2012 that has prophetic, future telling in it. Guideline number 3, keep writing. Do not stop to edit, rephrase, think, or censor. Those are 2 different parts of your brain. When you stop to censor, you're canceling creative part. Don't go back and read what you've written until after this free writing session is over. Trust your pen, stay focused on the topic and the image that arises. If you keep your pen moving, you'll bypass the censor, the resistance, the editor, the critic, and eventually, if you're lucky, the ego. Don't judge your writing. Whatever comes up, write it down. Don't resist. If you reach a point where you think that you can't think of what to write, take a breath, relax your shoulders, loosen your grip on your pen, and let whatever comes up come up. If nothing comes up for the duration of the session, accept that. Surrender to that. There's always tomorrow. If that does happen, I always recommend that you doodle. Just keep your pen moving. Doodle. The doodle will bring some sort of creative juice back in. Whatever you do, above all, do not go back and read what you've already written. We're training our brain to be in creative mode. If you can do this for 20 minutes, you can do this for 2 hours. If you can't do it for 20 minutes, it's because you're blocking and censoring. And that's a muscle response. So we're deconditioning that muscle response to focus. Rule number 6, tell the truth, even if it scares you, especially if it scares you. Number 7, let your writing find its flow and its form. Allow your writing to organically take shape as a poem, an essay, a rant, a speech, a dialogue. Whatever form it takes, don't stop its flow. Even if you don't recognize it as your own writing, let it come up. We'll identify if it's your writing. It might be your writing coming through you that you didn't know. Allow your writing to surprise you. Be passionate, write about the things that are important to you. Show up to write every day. This builds your creative muscle. And if you practice daily, your writing will be more passionate, livelier, and more astonishing. Number 10, when the session is over, read your writing aloud. Listen for what works and what doesn't. And if you're sharing in Write Club, then let us listen for what works and doesn't. And when you hear something that resonates with you, it will also resonate with your reader. And with that, I'm going to turn off my camera so you don't have distraction. And we will flow right into our free writing meditation. So, sit in a comfortable position with a pen and a paper handy. Take 3 deep breaths in through your nose and exhale through your mouth, letting your weight drop to the bottom half of your body as you exhale. Let your shoulders drop and bring your attention to your breath, following the inhalation and the exhalation for several moments. If your mind wanders, bring it back to your breath. Follow the rising and falling of your belly with each breath. Now pick up your pen and bring it to your notebook and begin to write. For now, write just the statements: I want, I need, I desire. Just repeat, for now, just writing, I want, I need, I desire. Continue on writing, I want, I need, I desire. Now, if you've written them one after the others, begin to write I want and leave a line. I need and leave a line. I desire and leave a line. Repeat that. Repeat doing that as I speak. Do not judge what you are writing. Just repeat those three. Let it come freely. Now, as you've given space for a few, as many as have come, begin to fill the list of what you need, what you want, and what you desire. Differentiate for yourself. Decide what you want, what you need, and what you desire. Feel free to add more wants, add more needs, or add more desires. But just repeat, I want, I need, I desire. The things that you write on this list may be very concrete, or they could be completely abstract. But whether they're tangible or intangible, try to be as specific as possible. I want, I need, I desire. If at any point you stop having a want, a need, or a desire, just take a breath, relax your shoulders, relax your jaw, and come back with dear, and think of that person that you love, that you want to send this message to. And tell them, I want, I need, I desire. Feel free to add words like really, what I really want, what I really need, what I really desire. Feel free also to add words like truly, what I truly want, what I truly need, what I truly desire. As you write from deep within. Write without self-censoring. Nobody ever has to see this, so you might as well write it down and get it out. The deepest things that you want, that you need, that you desire. Speak the unspeakable. Hear what your heart and soul most long for. Feel free to add the word so. I so want. I so need. I so desire. Surprise yourself. Tell yourself something you didn't already know. Listen to what your soul is telling you without judgment. Allow your words to be like the fool. No judgment, no discernment, just naivety. I want, I need, I desire. And feel free to now add a past tense to the journey. I did want. I did need. I did desire. It could also sound like I had wanted. I had needed. I had desired. At any time you find your pen slowing down, remember to bring dear and whatever the name you chose for that person that you're writing this love letter to. Remember, this is for them. They need to hear this. They want to hear this. They desire hearing this. Feel free to add the words you too. Then I want you to. I need you to. I desire for you to. as you're finishing the last thoughts of want and need and desire. There's a quote by Mary Oliver. She says, "Instructions for living a life. Pay attention, be astonished, tell about it." And here I will add, write about it. With your instructions for living your life, a life that has been very well lived, is to pay attention, be astonished, and write about it. And take all the time you need to finish this free writing session. You're doing a great job. Write on.